The first big idea I'd like to share with you is something that's pretty rare, and this is called supply demand shock. Now, we all know that in the economy, usually a recession or a depression is caused when demand declines. So times get tough, people don't have money, there isn't a wealth effect, their stocks aren't going up, their house isn't going up in value, or they lose their job and they feel poorer. So they stop buying things, right? And that's an issue where we have demand shock. The demand collapses. But occasionally, and this is rare, we have something we call supply demand shock. And that's what I predict we are seeing now a little bit, and we will see more of. What is supply demand shock? Well, it's probably best if I illustrate it with a little study I did. This is not a formal study, it was just something I did because I thought it was interesting. And it's looking at airline prices. And I was looking as the quarantines began at what was happening to the price of airline tickets. And I wasn't taking any flights. I'm used to traveling like 3 times a month, and I'm kind of enjoying this staying at home, not going anywhere. It's been a nice change for me, at least. And what I noticed at first, and if you look at this graph of the last 60 days, now this is as of maybe 2 weeks ago, I ran this chart here, and this is from Google Flights. And I simply looked up a flight from Miami to LAX, right? Common flight, nothing complicated about that one. And I live in Palm Beach, Florida now, so that's a flight I might take, right? And before the quarantine started, here was the cost of that flight. It was generally around $325 or so to take that flight, okay? And then you saw the price start to drop here as the lockdown started and everybody was worried about flying. They didn't want to get on an airplane. You couldn't socially distance. It was a risky behavior. So the airline industry just plummeted. Obviously, we know that. And you saw it kind of bounce around these lower prices where the tickets got really cheap at one point. And you could get these tickets if you were lucky for like $50. Okay. It was amazing. But then what we saw, okay, so first remember demand falls off. And there's a lot of supply out there, so the prices go down, right? That's the first phase. But then you have the supply fall off. All the airlines start grounding their airplanes. They start parking them. They put them in storage. They cancel these routes. And then supply falls off. Okay? So then you see the price go back up. And look at this. When I ran this 2 weeks ago, the price of this flight was $437. It was considered high by Google Flights, okay? Because the supply had fallen off. So this is what's called supply demand shock. We had this in the 70s with oil, okay, with gasoline prices, right? And it's an interesting phenomenon, and it stinks. It's a bad thing, and we've seen supply chains get disrupted. So supply demand shock, one big idea. Okay, trickle-up economics. So we've all heard of trickle-down economics, mostly referring to Ronald Reagan and supply-side economics and how the wealth trickles down through the system is that theory, and that's fine. Now what we have is something I call trickle-up economics, meaning that you see, for example, in the real estate world, right? You see, okay, people lose their job, so they ask for a forbearance on their mortgage. Or if they're a renter, they ask their landlord for a break and they stop paying their rent. And it's like this game of hot potato where the renter says, hey, I can't pay. And then there might be a city rule or a county rule that says you can't evict them right now. Okay. And then you go to your lender and say, hey, my tenant isn't paying me, so I can't pay the mortgage. And the lender says, no problem, we'll give you a forbearance. Right. And then what do? They go to their bondholders and start defaulting on bonds. Right. And it's this game of hot potato where every contract in the world is being renegotiated. We saw this during the Great Recession, where it was like this trickle up, where the first person on the food chain says they can't pay, then they go to the next person, and all of this sort of trickles up to more and more economic hardship. Okay, so that's something that is occurring. I predict that there will be a huge either expansion of the Section 8 rental assistance program for housing or some kind of new housing assistance program. I think, like it or not, folks, we are moving into an era of the rich get richer, more wealth inequality, universal basic income. I had Andrew Yang, the presidential candidate, on my show, and I'm a libertarian-leaning person. I have a lot of libertarian friends. Even they believe that we probably need to move toward a universal basic income concept. And it's like totally against their philosophy. It's really surprised me. Modern monetary theory, another thing that I don't agree with, okay? But this is the idea that you can pretty much just print and create money forever, spend without much of a tether on it in terms of government spending, and there's not much of a consequence for it. Now, we all know that the usual consequence for this is inflation, and I think there are definitely inflationary pressures in the system because of this idea, and they will continue, but will they be as significant as the spending, as all of these multi-trillion-dollar and more to come bailouts? I don't know. It's a very hard thing to tell. The idea of a digital dollar. Early on in this crisis, we saw articles about how money, literally money, cash, was dirty, and how you could catch COVID-19 from handling dollar bills or coins. There's a lot of this movement. I have another one of my podcasts called the CryptoCast, where I discuss cryptocurrencies and things like that. And I'd love to be wrong about this, but I'm not a fan of Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, really. And the reason is that the two most powerful entities the world has ever known are governments and central banks. There's an old saying, never bet against the Fed. And I agree with that. We want to align our interests with these two most powerful entities the human race has ever known, especially the US government and the US central bank, the Federal Reserve. So the cryptocurrency that will win the game is going to be the dollar that's digital. It'll be a digital dollar, a cryptocurrency dollar. It won't be Bitcoin. It won't be Ethereum. It won't be any of those. And by the way, I'd love to be wrong about this, because I would love nothing more than to see a decentralized cryptocurrency win the day, but I just don't think I'm going to be wrong about that.